Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Positive Leadership Movement. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and in this episode, we're going to be talking more about how to create a positive culture in your workplace. Now, in episode 8, we discussed how to create the right foundation for this type of culture shift and how to overcome any resistance to it. Now, in episode 9, you'll discover the next steps in this process to make sure that your culture shift is a success and that it lasts. And as always, when I'm sharing specifics like this with you, it's all evidence-based and fully tested. In fact, this whole process of shifting to a positive culture has been extensively examined by one of the premier researchers in the positive leadership field, Kim Cameron. You've heard me mention him several times in this podcast, and that's because his work is so crucial to this field. And in fact, for what we're going to talk about today, he's devoted a whole chapter to it in his book, Practicing Positive Leadership. If you don't have a copy of that book, run to get it right now because it is like a manual for positive leaders. All right, so let's get into the specific steps we're going to discuss today. And there's 3 steps. First, we're going to talk about how to create an aspirational vision for your organization and the culture and why this matters so much. Next, we're going to talk about how to develop commitment to the culture shift throughout the whole organization. And then finally, and so importantly, how to maintain and sustain the change. Because, hey, we don't want to put in all this effort to changing the culture for it not to last, right? We don't want it to be just like there and gone in a flash. No, we want it to last so that you are getting all the benefits of a positive culture for many, many years to come. Okay, and yes, as always, as you can hear from all of that, we've got an episode that is jam-packed full of value. And I just have to take a moment here to say thank you. Thank you for listening and thank you for inspiring me to create this content and for sending me your questions. It means I'm able to produce episodes that are relevant and on point for what you're dealing with as a leader. So if you've got a question about positive leadership, just send it in an email to questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com and I'll answer them on this show. Oh, and of course, don't forget to rate and review this podcast so that we can share this content far and wide because we all know more leaders and organizations need this positive approach. All right, let's dive into our topic and we'll start with the aspirational vision I mentioned. Now, at this point, just as a frame of reference, where we're picking up here, I am assuming that you've been preparing your organization for the shift to a positive culture and you've worked through reducing the resistance and building some momentum for the change, right? And if you haven't done these steps yet, go back. I urge you to go back and listen to episode 8, which dives deep into these, right? You've really got to do these 2 pieces first and lay the groundwork before we get to this next step that I'm going to talk about now, okay? Which is creating that aspirational vision. Okay, so what is the aspirational vision and why do we need it? Well, as Simon Sinek would say, let's start with why, okay, so that we know exactly the reason we're going to do this. We need an aspirational vision because we need to communicate what the new culture is going to be, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. Because remember, up to this point, we've just been preparing for it, right, and getting people on board for the change. But now, what exactly that change is going to be needs to be articulated. So for you as a leader, this is the time when you get to truly inspire people. You get to paint the picture of what the organization looks like when it's flourishing. What are people experiencing as they are flourishing? As human beings, we need these aspirational visions to help us realize our full potential. Now, as you put this aspirational vision together, think about making it appeal to both sides of the brain. What am I talking about? Okay, well, we have a left side of our brain, which in general, I mean, I'm going to simplify this, but it handles basically the logical and analytical tasks. Okay, it's sort of like the cognitive workhorse is the left side of the brain, right? And then we have our right side of our brain, which is where we imagine and we create, right? And so it does all sort of the creative work. And we all know people who sort of fit these descriptions, right? We all know some left side brainers. They want the data and the facts and the evidence. And we know people who are more right side brainers, right? They're constantly coming up with new ideas. Maybe they're artistic. They tell stories. They're just super creative. So yeah, for some of us, we may have a tendency to one side or the other. But at the end of the day, we all have both sides of our brain, okay? And so an aspirational vision needs to appeal to each hemisphere, right? We got to appeal to the left and the right. So what that means for you is that the vision for your flourishing organization with a positive culture needs to have data or evidence combined with imagery and emotion for it to be truly compelling, okay? So, for example, to appeal to the left side of the brain, think about questions like this. What is our key competency as an organization? Who are the primary stakeholders and what are their expectations? How will we meet those expectations? What metrics of success are we going to measure? What are the challenges we need to overcome, right? So it's very factual based. It's very focused on the logic, the how, the what, how are we going to do stuff? What are we going to do? It's really focused on that. Now, for the right side of the brain, think about questions like these. What do we really care about as an organization? What's our why that inspires and motivates us every day to do what we do? What does it look like to realize the full potential of fulfilling that why? What stories, images, analogies can we use to help visualize our flourishing future? What symbols can bring people together, right? I mean, you get the idea, right? So here, we're really looking to bring in that emotion. We're really looking to bring in those images and really paint the picture, as it were. So you get the idea here. So you want elements for both. You want elements for the left and the right brain. And now we just need to make the vision interesting and really appealing, truly compelling, right? And we do this by helping people see new perspective, right? And so what's really interesting about this, by the way, to make something compelling, to make information interesting or compelling, there's research on this. So researcher Murray Davis found that when we present information that is largely in line with what is already known, people tend to dismiss it. Right? I mean, it makes sense. It's not that compelling because, hey, I already know that. Why should I pay more attention to it? But at the same time, if we present information that is so radically different from what is already known, people will also dismiss that too. It's just too far-fetched for them to hold on to, right? And so the way to create a compelling vision is the Goldilocks, what I call the Goldilocks solution, right? It needs to be just right. So we need just the right amount of new and existing information. So essentially, you're using a similar paradigm to what people are used to, but providing a new way of looking at it. A new way of seeing alternative possibilities and a different future. And that's how we make it compelling. So for example, think about a couple of these ideas. So Southwest Airline aspires to become the world's most loved, most flown, and most profitable airline. The Alzheimer's Association aspires to be a world without Alzheimer's disease. Now, and you might think even with that second one, well, gee, isn't that radically different from what we know? Is a world without Alzheimer's disease kind of radical? Well, yeah, no, because think about it. We've eradicated so many diseases. Yes, it might seem like a really aspirational goal here that we're going to have a world without Alzheimer's, but it's totally possible, right? Because if we've eradicated all kinds of other diseases, why not this one too, right? So these are just short statements and just a couple of examples, but they help illustrate the point that we have to create this aspirational vision that people can rally around and that can be achieved through new culture. Now, if you're grappling with this and what your aspirational vision is, good. You should be. This shouldn't be something you just sit down and bang out in 5 minutes, okay? No. It needs to percolate. It needs to marinate. Take your time with it. Go online and look at some of the most aspirational visions of our time. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. President Kennedy's speech about putting a man on the moon. Feed your creative right side brain as you work on this aspirational vision. And once you think you have it, run it by some close confidants, okay? Now, and I really do mean close confidants, okay? I don't mean just spread it out there and share it with whoever. Share it with people who are close to you, who understand what you're trying to do, who support you, and get their reaction before you share it more broadly, right? Because they may have some effective feedback. And you gotta, of course, you got to be measured in how you take feedback, right? Sometimes people have excellent feedback, they mean well, but it might not serve your purpose. So you, of course, ultimately get to decide what you accept and what you don't accept with feedback. But do share it with some close people before you release it to the world, okay? Now, once you've got your aspirational vision, it's time to move to the next step, which is to develop commitment for it, because just like any other initiative or change you've ever implemented as a leader, guess what? It ain't gonna work if you don't get buy-in. First from the organization's top leaders, but then throughout the whole organization. So imagine, think for a moment of a chocolate fountain, right? We've all been at events where there are chocolate fountains. Oh, yummy, right? You can picture it in your mind. The chocolate flows from the top and it cascades down to those lower levels until basically every level is totally saturated with delicious chocolate, right? Well, the aspirational vision and getting commitment for it is like that. You want it to flow fully and effortlessly throughout your organization. Okay, now, if you're still with me and you're not running off to grab a chocolate bar, which you certainly would be forgiven for doing, you might be thinking, yeah, easier said than done to get all that buy-in, right? So how exactly do we do this? Well, we do it by celebrating wins, no matter how small, and by publicly declaring what we're gonna do, right? So for the wins, I really do mean celebrating small wins, right? Maybe that glitchy copy machine finally gets replaced, or employees get new computer monitors. Maybe a new plan to recognize birthdays and other life events gets implemented. Maybe a new logo is unveiled. Like whatever it is, celebrate it, publicize it, let people in the organization know these things are happening, even if they're small. And in fact, I would say, let them know because they're small, because the premise behind this is to demonstrate progress, to say, hey, we're getting things done. We're already making some small changes, because when people see this, they start to feel the momentum and they want to be part of that wave of progress, right? So small wins are really important. Don't just say, oh yeah, but it's not that impressive. It's this tiny little thing. If you have that reaction, then you need to share that win. A win is a win is a win. And the more we share our wins, the more progress and the more momentum we build together. Now, the other part of developing commitment that I mentioned is to publicly declare the goals and aspirations for the organization, right? That are in this vision, this aspirational vision. And there's a lot of research that backs up the effectiveness of this, right? Essentially, when people make a public declaration about what they're going to achieve, they are way more likely to accomplish it than people who don't declare it publicly, right? And so making a public declaration makes us accountable to ourselves and to others, because we inherently want to make good on our commitment. And so we give it more focus and attention than if we had just kept that goal or aspiration to ourselves and just held it privately, right? And by the way, I mean, we're talking about organizations, but this works on a personal level too. And it's the reason, in fact, it's the reason that recently I have stated, and I'm continuing to state publicly on social media these days, that my golden retrievers are going to be therapy dogs. Now, believe me, we have a lot of work to do for that to happen. But because I've publicly declared that's my aspirational vision for them, guess what? You know it's going to happen. In fact, it's already in motion, right? Because I declared that, I am now committed to training them every day and using professional trainers to get them to the level they need to be. I'm looking into when they can take their first test and what they need skill-wise to pass that. I mean, it's happening. And a big part of the reason that it's happening is because I put that out there publicly. Because I can tell you that our dogs are 5 and 3 now. When we first got them, we got our first dog at 8 months old. We said, oh, wouldn't it be great if she were a therapy dog? Yeah, she's 5 now. And only now am I publicly declaring that I want her to be a therapy dog. And same with our second dog. When we got her at 6 months old. We said, oh, wouldn't it be great if she's a therapy dog, if they both could be therapy dogs? Well, she's 3 now. And it's only just happening. And the difference is because before it was just a private little dream that was shared by me and my husband. We never shared it with anyone else. But now it's out there. It's out there publicly and it's happening. And the same is true for your organization. If you publicly declare that your goal is, like the Alzheimer's Association did, that your goal is a world without Alzheimer's disease, guess what they're collectively focused on as an organization now? Guess what they are working toward every single day? It gives them inspiration. It gives them accountability, right? So just to summarize on this point, you develop commitment by getting people to buy in, by sharing and celebrating wins. And I really do mean the small wins just as much as the big wins. And you develop commitment by making a public declaration of what you're going to achieve. People respond to these simple techniques because they want to be part of a winning team. They want to be part of an organization that does what it says it will do. All right, so the third and final step we're going to discuss today for how to create a positive culture is the need to make this change last. And this is so absolutely crucial because we've all been there when change is just thrust upon an organization and it lasts for, all of 2 months and then it's gone. And it's usually because A, the foundation wasn't created in the first place. There was no preparation, as we talked about in episode 8. B, there wasn't enough effort to overcome the resistance. Again, and another step that we talked about in episode 8. C, maybe the vision for the new culture and where it could take the organization was not properly articulated. And D, nearly always there is a lack of buy-in. Okay? Case in point, when I worked at the cable news channel MSNBC, and this is many years ago now in the early 2000s, they were basically a distant third out of 3 channels, okay? Fox News and CNN were vying for the majority of the market share. And then there we were, little MSNBC, just basically fighting for their ratings scraps. So the leadership decided, in their infinite wisdom, that the channel and the organization needed a new image. We were going to become America's independent news channel. Now, instead of preparing people for this and doing the research and addressing the resistance and creating some aspirational purpose for this, it was just announced one day. The logo in the bottom right hand of the screen, that little logo that you see on cable news channels, it changed from, the MSNBC has that colorful peacock, right? Like NBC. That peacock changed, the colors of it changed to the American flag. And it said underneath, America's independent news channel. Now, within the organization, we were all basically asked to identify with this and to get on board with this essentially cultural and branding change. But why? No one ever explained why we were doing it. No one offered anything as aspirational about it. The only thing that was ever offered was, well, we think it'll help with our ratings. And there was definitely no effort to get buy-in at the leadership level. So what do you think happened? Well, actually, you know exactly what happened because, first of all, you know that MSNBC is not known as America's independent news channel. And secondly, you may have been listening to this story and just thinking, like, what? What is she talking about? When did this happen? I don't remember this. Well, yeah, of course you don't, because you know how long it lasted for? Less than 6 months. The change became a joke, inside and outside of the organization. It was just such a blatant ratings grab, and everyone saw through it. Even the people in the organization, there was nothing aspirational about it. The organization just decided to drape themselves in the American flag and figured that that would be an effective and lasting change. No, it did not work. And that is why this story is now my cultural or branding change cautionary tale. And we don't want that for your organization. So let's discuss how to make sure that your cultural change lasts and that it accomplishes what it set out to do, right? Which is to create a positive culture where people and the organization are truly flourishing and reaching new levels of excellence. All right, so first up, if we're going to demonstrate accomplishment, if this culture change is going to last, we have to decide how we're going to measure that. So what benchmarks are we going to set? What metrics matter? How are we going to measure them and how often? That's the first piece. Next, we have to cultivate a sense of, hey, this is really happening. And one way to do that is by sharing prime examples of people who embody the new culture. Right? Tell the story of what they did, why it mattered, and how it fits with the new culture. You know, champion these stories and these people so that others can model the exemplary behavior. The fact is, it's easier for us to understand what's expected of us if we see an example. And hey, if you've ever tried cooking something new, you know this. It is much easier to watch someone do it first and then you do it rather than just read through a bunch of instructions in a recipe book. And the same is true in your organization, right? It's one thing to communicate to people like what this culture is and what's expected and the behaviors that are part of the culture. And yeah, people can grasp that. But if you share stories of people showing the exemplary behavior, guess what? Now they start to really get it. Oh, I see. Oh, wow. Well, you know, Sherry didn't really do anything, that like difficult or hard, but I see what you're saying. She really did do something that fits with our new culture, right? So people start to see this. All right. Third, remember that even though you followed all the steps we've discussed, people are still going to feel a little shaky and unsure with all this change. So make sure there is social support, okay? Make sure there are social support systems in place. Offer gatherings where people can interact socially. For example, have an ice cream social, hold town hall meetings where employees can freely ask questions of leaders. Here again, you get the idea, right? Communication and connection is key. People want to know they're part of a collective, that they're not feeling afraid and on their own, that instead they're part of a tribe that's all in this together, right? We're all in it together. We're moving forward together. That's the type of social support you want to create. And then finally is a special challenge for you as a leader. What can you do to demonstrate your open commitment to the cause? Maybe it's giving up some kind of perk or symbol that's associated with the culture that's about to change, right? What will essentially become the old culture. Maybe it's starting a new practice that is aligned with the new culture. I mean, essentially, what meaningful action can you take to make your own public declaration that things are changing and you are so completely embracing it? All right. As always, I feel like I say this on every episode. We covered a lot today, and we did. So let's just do a quick recap. We covered the 3 steps to help you shift to a positive culture once you've prepared the organization for it and overcome any resistance. And those 3 steps were to first create an aspirational vision that is compelling and appeals to both the left and right side of the brain, and that it's got hard data and evidence coupled with imagery and emotion, right? And that we're presenting a nice combination of new information within a similar paradigm, right? That whole notion of, hey, if we give information that's already known, it'll get dismissed. If we go too far afield, it'll also get dismissed. We need that happy medium to make it really compelling, right? It's aspirational enough that it's going to grab people, but it's not so far out there that people say, wow, like I can't get behind that I can't even imagine that being the case, right? So we got to strike that balance. Second step, get buy-in throughout the organization by touting even the smallest of wins and making a public declaration of what's going to be accomplished. And third, make the change sustainable by measuring key metrics, sharing stories of exemplary behavior, providing social support so that people feel camaraderie in navigating this change. And for you as a leader, what can you give up or take on that sends a clear message that you are all in on this shift to a positive culture? Woohoo! Time to celebrate, because if you follow all these steps, you're going to enjoy a successful culture shift in your organization. And in a few months, you'll probably be emailing me to share how much you've achieved, that productivity and performance are up, burnout and turnover are down, and basically that your organization and its people are flourishing. How do I know? Because like I said before, we know this stuff works. It's been studied, tested, researched. And are there other ways to shift your culture? Of course. Will they work? I don't know. Maybe. But what I do know is that what I have shared with you in this episode, and in fact in every episode, is a method that works. All right. Thanks for joining me for this week's Positive Leadership Movement episode, as we really took a deep stroll into making sure your shift to a positive culture can be a sustainable success. And join me next week when we're going to discuss how you can increase employee engagement. And this is true for you whether you think the engagement is good or it could be better. Wherever your employees are at on engagement, this episode is going to be relevant. And it's actually in response to a question that Jane T., one of our listeners, sent me. She said, Alex, I'm totally on board with positive leadership. I feel like I'm doing a lot of the things you talk about on the show, but I'm really struggling to get my employees fully engaged at work. They seem happy, and I've definitely taken measures to make it a cool place to work. We have social events once a month. We have a pool table and some other games where people can take a break. But it seems like these things could be hurting rather than helping, and I'm just not sure what to do next. I'd love your thoughts on how to get them more energized and engaged in what they're doing in their jobs and what we're doing as an organization. Oh, great question, Jane. I am so glad you sent me this, because I definitely have a few ideas and thoughts for you, and of course, all of our listeners. So join me next week as we dive into employee engagement. And if you've got a question or comment about positive leadership, you want me to address it on this show, send me an email at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com. For now, this is Alex Bratty signing off and thanking you for being part of the positive leadership movement and inspiring me to do what I do every single day.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.